Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025. It is 4 o'clock, and this is the regular meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District Board of Commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm president of the board, and we are calling this meeting to order. Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. And if you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. Let's do a roll call of commissioners. My name is Jeff Randall. I'm commissioner for District 1 and president of the board.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tuber, Commissioner for District 3.
Okay, so we're all here. So first thing on our agenda is approving the agenda itself. Do we have any changes to the agenda, Kevin or staff? Nope.
Motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor of approving the agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye, agenda is approved. Okay, so we have a first public comment section, and I see we've got maybe some new faces in the audience. If you want to make a public comment for something on the agenda, wait until we get to that item because we'll allow public comment at that time. If you're here for something, I'll just read the statement and it'll answer the question. So the public comment period allows members of the public to comment limited to 3 minutes each on any items not specifically listed on the agenda or for items listed on the consent agenda. Prior to any public comment, members of the public must first be recognized by the president and are not permitted to disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct and fair progress of the commission's meeting. After an initial warning by the president, individuals who intentionally violate these guidelines through actual disruption of the commission meeting will be dropped from the meeting. So do we have anyone who would like to make a comment on something not on the agenda or on consent agenda? In the back first, Cindy.
Cindy Jane, District 2. Just a quick comment. It'd be great to see bike racks up there. Just hide my bike to a light pool. So
Okay. Kevin, did you hear that? We have no bike rack. I don't know how we made it through the county permit process without a bike rack.
On the back.
That was actually something that was brought to my attention early last week. So thank you for the reminder. We will put somebody on it.
Okay. Thanks, Cindy. Is that your only comment? You came out here to
No,
review our bike racks? Bust us on no bike rack? Okay. Any other comments, Leo?
Yeah, I got a couple.
Okay.
So a couple of meetings ago, you had mentioned that you got a call from one of your ISPs about an issue. So I just wanted to say that you said that apparently the issue was on the customer side, but that customer actually resolved their issue. This is a known issue, and the customer actually resolved it by unplugging their router from the network and plugging their computer in so they could get online and do their business for at least 4 hours so that the information in your guys' system could time out and eventually get flushed. And then when they plug their router back in, everything worked smoothly.
Okay.
Cody and Kyle had previously known how to resolve this issue. It had come up before. This is a known issue with Calix. And as a matter of fact, kids at PUD that following Friday had the same exact issue, but not with just one ISP, but all ISPs in a development. And in the end, the resolution was the quickest way to solve this is just reboot the switch.
Unplug and replug.
Huh?
Oh, I said unplug and replug.
That was it.
Yeah.
And bang, it was fixed.
Mm.
The issue that I really had was the lack of support. So you guys were there at 10 a.m. shortly after this issue had cropped up. I called in for support. Could get no response, no response, no response. Finally, I called Commissioner. I did not get a response till 7:55 that evening, and the response was, I don't know. We'll send somebody out tomorrow. There was no normally you would coordinate. What do you see? This is what I see. Let's get this. No coordination. So this is a known issue. But the big thing is you need to work together with everybody. Everybody needs to work together, get problems resolved. And 10 o'clock in the morning and finally getting a call at 7:55 at night, who wouldn't be upset? So the other thing is, though it is nice to know why my customer might be online and I'm showing them offline, I really don't need you guys to have your system notify me that you shut off their power because they didn't pay their bill.
Okay, I got a lot. I'm gonna give you a second to rephrase that, 'cause I don't get what you just said.
Right. So I got a notice from the PUD that somebody's service was disconnected.
Right?
I do not need to know that you disconnected their power.
And this is like someone who has an account with us,
Yeah.
electrical account, we disconnect
Right.
them
You're right.
and you got a notice, huh? I don't fully understand that.
You don't understand? Yeah, so. right.
Privacy issue.
Yeah,
So-
He doesn't need to know that.
yeah, okay,
Right, so,
okay.
right, and it wasn't me inquiring, it was the fact that you guys contacted us.
Okay,
And it's like, I'm like, you should not be calling me about this.
okay. Is that the extent of your comments?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just say one short thing. I was the commissioner you called, and I guess for me, as I think about this stuff, these really aren't normally commissioner issues to be involved in the details of our service. However, this is new. We're, I think as long as we're out building fiber and hooking up people for the first time, it's kind of a new business line. So how we handle problems and we have new people coming on, how that's communicated, I think it's going to evolve. So, but thank you for your comment. All right. Did we have anybody else who had a comment to make on things not on the agenda or on consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to manager and staff reports.
Okay, I'm off of mute. We'll try to go through quick here. Oh, I was gonna strange, but I'm doing a shout out to Tom Tersch. Hasn't been here for a while. Tom, you haven't emailed me a little bit, so I'm just glad to see you. Now we'll go on to manager's report.
You just want to go back in the doghouse? I mean, that's what Tom sends you to the doghouse. You don't want.
No, Tom doesn't. I enjoy his emails. So just a shout out. We're gonna go with Mike Bailey first, and he's gonna give us a quick update on some financials.
So just wanted to give a quick update on our cash position. Where you got about 10.6 this week in the bank. We're doing pretty good with that. Revenues are down a little bit overall, but still within about 5%, which is in the utility world is pretty good. So overall, we're looking pretty good on financially.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Next, we're gonna have Will do an update on our website and some of the info that we can gather. A lot of people don't know that Will kind of run, or not kind of, Will and his team run our website, and they keep a lot of info on it. So Will, take it away.
Yeah, if there's specific questions about the website or traffic, let me know and I can get the answers. Kind of have to do a little bit of digging. I did a quick couple of reports that I'll pull up. Let me see, where are we? All right. Where'd my share button go? Sorry about that. Too many buttons. Zoom keep, there it is. Okay. Now you're not going to be able to see the details because it's small, but this is from 2023 going back traffic, and it shows the number of hits to specific web pages on our website. You can also see if I scroll back, overall traffic has increased on viewing on the website over the last number of years. This peak that you see right there at the end, that was our all-county outage rather than all-county picnic, the all-county outage we had the other week. So a lot of people looking up the PUD's website to find out more information. The obvious way that they do is they go to the home page. That's the little slash at the top there. Then they're looking at the outage info. I gotta move this around so I can see things on here. A little scroll bar. I'm not sure exactly how this was an article we put out a number of 2 or 3 years ago. Why is half of the power out to my house? It was a news post. I assume it got shared with some community groups or something like that because it's got a high number of hits. And we had another one about what's the service drop? So that was another post. So that must have been another one that got shared on some sort of network groups because they've had a lot of hits. But pay now, all of these things, employment has gone up during the GM search because it was shared with NRECA, and there was a lot of traffic that way. Broadband maps, assistance contact info. So when we did our last website redesign that was during COVID. We took all this data and we tried to redesign traffic to make sure that everything was most popular sites were the sites where customers could get the info. We directed them that way. Those trends are all still moving in that direction. Any questions about this? Ken, you look confused. Or it looks like you have a question.
What does it mean? Why is half of the power out to my house?
So if you have trouble with neutral, we had a couple of calls about this where you'd have power. Oh, Kevin can probably explain a little bit better. There'd be a loose neutral, and
Yeah.
there would be low levels of power, or power would be out to part of the house and not to others. And what would happen is that we wanted people to call the PUD because they would call an electrician. They'd have to pay the electrician, and then the electrician would pay the PUD to pull the meter and inspect to see if it was a meter jaw or if it was a loose wire or something like that. And so if they called the PUD first, then they were saving money. They didn't have to pay the electrician for the first time. Why that became such a popular article, I am not sure. We'll have to do some investigation on that. Okay. Let's see if it switches over. Yeah. Another search is how people get to our website. Again, we did a lot of work on this a while back, and the trends are still consistent. Still, the most common way is they get there through Google. The next, they get there direct by typing in the website, or they've got the link saved on their computer. Bing, DuckDuckGo, Yahoo, those browsers. MailPoet is our email service for our e-newsletter that we send out. So that's links coming back from the e-newsletter, and then through Facebook, mobile, and local. And I'm not sure what LM is. I haven't had time to look through that. And most of those spikes of traffic that you see are outages and large outages. That's when we get the most users. We've had some other, I think when we first did the registrations for broadband, there was some. When we've done some of the bill credits during COVID that we had, there were some large spikes of traffic, but generally that's how that flows. All those peaks are usually outages. So that's what I have real quick from the website. If there's specific things that anyone would like me to look up, I'm happy to pull reports and get more data. Kevin, was there anything else you wanted to see?
No, we just haven't had a update on our website for a while and thought it would be an interesting topic.
Yep. Okay. Stop share.
And I'll be real quick with an electrical review. So we have the new transformer energized, larger regulators in Quilcene substation. We are looking at a program to next move the transformer out of Discovery Bay, put the small one in there. We will probably wait till the concrete work is done in Dana Roberts. We're to the point with Dana Roberts substation work that either ICPE will come down here, or I may run to ICPE for a day or two, trying to work out the logistics there, because if we can get the concrete poured summer timeframe and set the transformer, it it just gives us the extra redundancy we need for next winter. So we were hoping to get a lot of this stuff done during the winter. It just didn't happen with delays in the transformers and stuff like that. But now we feel very comfortable it will happen prior to winter outage season. So that was a quick update.
Okay. Anything else?
No, sir.
So
Okay.
I have a quick question for Kevin, and we haven't really discussed it much lately in depth. I know it happens, discussions happen elsewhere, and that's supply chain. You're talking about this stuff got pushed out from winter and looking forward to the next winter. Where are we at with supply chain for what's going to impact what we need to do?
So supply chain is an issue. It primarily on the bigger equipment. Substation transformers are out. We got one email that Waukesha transformers are out 5 to 10 years, and they may not even bid on transformers right now, and they're a good name brand transformer. So there are very specific items that are going to be a problem. Regulators, the board just approved us to buy some new regulators. They're approximately 2 years out. For the substations, we need some 115 breakers. They're approximately 2 years out. So it is a problem for us and some of the projects we need to complete, the new substations or the additional bays, that kind of stuff. Some things as easy as like a 115V air switch. Used to be 10 weeks. Right now it's 30 weeks to 40 weeks. And then if the vendor comes back, they could add another 10 weeks in a heartbeat. So there are problems in the supply chain, but we are trying to address that by buying additional material now. So that if we do have a problem or new construction, we will have some material on hand to either take care of the problem or put the new substation in.
I just looked up where Waukesha is and who it is. They're associated with GE, but it's Waukesha, Wisconsin. And I'm surprised that Aaron Berg hasn't proposed a transformer facility at the airport as this huge opportunity. But anyway,
So I guess one quick question to Kevin is to pin you down a little bit. So staff and yourself are being proactive at moving forward, even if the prices are, if it's going to be maybe more expensive, you are taking the steps to make sure to the best we can, we are going to have the materials available to make the changes we need to make, just say in the next 6 months.
So some of the items, Dan, we've already ordered. Some I need to get my drawings a little bit further along then so I can order like the 115 breakers. So there's some equipment that we know we need to order, but until we get a pinch further down the road in our drawings, for example, the new substation going in by the paper mill, we have the conceptuals, we have a lot of the preliminary work done, but I need to really jump into that hard so I know the breakers and how we're going to position them, which tells you, what accessories go on them, that kind of thing. So it is still a work in progress, honestly.
Thank you. I just want the public to be aware of the challenges that you have and that we have, that we're going to do our best, and it's on the radar that hopefully nothing's going to fall through the cracks, and we're going to do our best to make sure power stays on over the winter.
Correct.
okay. So we're down to commissioner reports unless there's questions for staff and anything else. Okay. Dan, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. Let's see. So I attended the BOC special meeting for our 2024 financial audit report on May 28th. That all went well. We're on a good trajectory there. I met with GM Street on May 30th. I attended our BOC executive session to discuss general manager candidates on June 1st. I attended the Jefferson Fire Chiefs meeting on June 2nd. I attended the Waputa Executive Board Officers Meeting today at Mason 3 in Shelton. So I've already, this is my third meeting of the day. So 2 for us and 1 at Mason. So that was kind of fun to see their meeting and, hear their things that they're doing down there and similarities between us and some differences between us. That was as my duty as vice president of this association at Waputa. I'll attend the Public Power Council meeting on June 4th and 5th. I plan on attending the Brennan Task Force meeting on June 6th down in Brennan, obviously. And I meet with General Manager Street on June 9th. I may attend NOANET on June 11th. And I will travel with the Waputa Executive Committee again to Ferry County to attend the Ferry County PD meeting on June 16th.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Ken?
I met with the general manager on the 26th of May. Also attended the audit report on the 28th. On the 30th, had a conversation with a customer about the rebate program. Also met with the general manager, and in addition, went out to see Peterson Lake, which at some point should be on our agenda for discussion. On the 1st, Sunday, took part in the discussion about candidates for the general manager position. On the 4th, I will participate in the executive session for PERMS. And on the 5th, attend the PERMS board meeting. That's the collective insurance. How do you call it?
Risk management pool or?
It's the, it's the Public Utilities Risk Management Service, where we all get together and share risk for various members of the pool. And on the 9th, I'll meet with the general manager. And that's my report.
Okay, so one quick question on you, Ken, your trip up to Peterson Lake. We had the presentation from the architect. Did anything stick out in your mind on your tour that wasn't included in the information we'd already received? Since we have to talk about it in the open, I'm kind of curious of your take on what we got versus what you saw.
Well, so I agree with what Jeff said in prior meeting. It's a beautiful site. I mean, it's really a gorgeous location. That being said, the ADU that's on the property has no value. That needs to be scraped.
Did you go down and look at it? I didn't go there when I
Oh,
went there,
yes,
'cause
I did.
I
I
was
did.
invited by the tenants and not PUD staff, so I didn't.
You can take my word for it. It's not, I wouldn't consider it habitable. And the other structure has possibilities, but I think we need to talk about what do we want to do with it?
Right.
What is the best use for the PUD?
Yeah.
So that'll be on a future agenda.
So the information we got did correlate to you as being accurate, maybe
Yes.
not complete, I don't know, but I just was curious of your take.
I was less impressed with the main house. And again, it depends, what purpose do you want to make of it?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we will talk more about Peterson Lake. I'm glad you got a chance to go up there
Yeah.
because just looking at a map, I had like some idea of what I thought I would see, and it was totally not that. I mean, that site is stunning, and you can't see it from any place till you're up there.
And thank you, Mr. Street, for taking me up there. I'm not sure I would have found it on my own.
Yep. So on the May 22nd, we had a North Olympic Development Council meeting. We had a presentation by the executive director of the Clallam County Housing Authority, and he had come up here from the Tri-Cities. So he started off saying, in the Tri-Cities, they build 1,000 homes per year. And then we started talking about affordable housing and things that different communities are doing and the problems we have with affordable housing. And I had to point out to him, well, the Tri-Cities is kind of this unicorn where I looked up how many jobs are funded directly or indirectly through the federal government, and it's this massive amount. It's like, okay, you're in Eastern Washington where things are cheap and you've got big money, so of course they're building 1,000 homes a year. Anyway, we did hear that I think I had mentioned to you guys before that NODC got a grant and worked with the national labs to put together a marine renewable energy report. And when the new administration came in, they stopped it from being released. Karen Affeld with the NODC has worked with the new federal agency people, and it will be released. They just had to tweak a few little things, and it's going to be released. So that was good news because a lot of work went into that. Had a meeting with Joel Paisner on the 24th. Our consultant for NRECA on the GM hiring process had phone meetings with her on the 25th and June 2nd. I attended the same special meeting we had on the audit, had a meeting with Kevin Street on the 29th, and attended the special PUD meeting we had this weekend to select which candidates we want to interview for the general manager. Today had a meeting with Joel in Paris talking about some of those same logistical things on the GM contract stuff. So we had the question come up on what kind of contract we would offer. So talked to Joel about that. He said we don't have kind of a boilerplate one to start with, which I think Lee is assuming that all these other utilities have these contracts. And it's like, well, we've only done one, but he has in mind like probably a 3-year contract. And we'll talk more about it, but we'll probably have an executive session soon before we're making offers so that we actually, when we hear back, this candidate is okay with this or not okay with that, we'll have a basis of understanding for what the general principles of the contract we think we should offer. So Joel said we'd set up a executive session for that. And then looking ahead on the 5th, we have our next Economic Development Council Team Jefferson board meeting. I believe the new executive director will be at that meeting. And I'll be going to Spokane for the NOAANet meeting on the 11th. And then that is all. That's my report. So moving on.
Consent.
Consent agenda. So do we have any changes to the consent agenda from staff or commissioners?
Nope. So I'll
Is there a
make,
question in the audience about the consent agenda?
No, could we scroll the?
so I'll,
Keep pace.
so I'll make the motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Okay.
Second,
All in favor of approving the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye, consent agenda is approved. Old business, which is our one and only item on the agenda, is the electrical rate proposal. Kevin, how are we gonna take this? Oh, you're muted, I think.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and then Sergey, he's going to give a presentation. We're hoping that after today that we can agree on the rates. There's some things we still have to work on. For example, time of use, the opt-out meter costs, those kind of things will be done at a later date. But we're hoping after discussions today with Sergey, the board and staff, that we can have a rate hearing June 17th to review the numbers that we're going to go over today. So that's our goal here. We've met with Sergey several times. We really appreciate everything he's doing for us, and thank you.
Okay, and just before Sergey starts rolling, we got several people here, I'm assuming, interested in this topic. The way we normally handle these things is have the presenter present his information. If we have a clarifying question, something doesn't make sense, we might stop him in the middle to say, hey, could you explain that? We missed it. But normally we let him do the presentation. Then we have commissioners ask questions of staff or the presenter. And then once we've done that, before we go into discussion and deliberation, I can't remember if there's, yeah, we don't have any specific action for resolution or anything scheduled for today, but we could direct staff to do that. Before we start discussing and deliberating, we give the audience a chance to ask questions or make comments. And that same kind of 3-minute rule applies. So just letting you know how we proceed. Okay, Sergey, you're up.
Great, and thank you for taking the opportunity and giving me the opportunity to continue our discussion. with the rate study. I'm going to share my screen real quick. You should be seeing the presentation right now. Is that on your screen? It looks like it is. All right, well, I'll dive right in. Again, as Kevin mentioned, we're just continuing our discussion of the electric portion of the overall study. Quick background, it's going to be a fairly concise presentation. We're going to do primarily kind of a rehash and discussion of our prior meetings, as well as bringing back a couple items that were requested by the board during our May discussion. So we're going to do a review of the prior meetings. We're going to go over the rate setting process just for those in the audience to make sure there's a good understanding, just a high level, what goes into a comprehensive study such as this one. And then we'll go over kind of the bullet points of the results and the recommendations that we have been bringing back and building on with the guidance of the board over the last several months as the study has evolved. As always, feel free to ask questions as we go throughout. So just as a reminder, the last comprehensive study that was completed for the PUD was in 2021. At that point, a multi-year strategy was developed, and as we were getting close to the end of that multi-year strategy, we commenced a new update towards the end of 2023. We started the analysis with the pole attachment update and kind of a refresher in terms of rate study fundamentals, kind of early on in 24. Then started really in earnest working on the electrics update, as well as the water and sewer systems, as well as the telecom system, but focusing our efforts primarily on the electric utility, and started presenting some preliminary findings to the board in November of last year. Since then, we have been going back and forth in terms of the first step, which we'll refresh in a couple of minutes what that step is, the revenue requirements, talking about multiple different ways how we can address our needs, including the comprehensive capital improvement program that has been identified. So we brought back several options in February as well as in March, kind of looking at additional scenarios, how we can meet the timing of the projects, how we can look at financing it differently, looking at different mechanisms such as RUS borrowing, interest-only borrowing, aligning with the current practices of the PD, as well as taking into account the timing it will take us to procure the loans as well. So with all that feedback, we came back with the latest scenario, kind of taking all the guidance under consideration in May, and presented some recommendations regarding that first step revenue requirement, which we'll look at in a minute, the cost of service as well, and the rate design. The rate design really focused on two key elements and two key changes. Number one element that really deviated from a standard kind of an adjustment was the elimination of the residential third tier. And the second element was to look at time of use rates for all classes of service. Now, during the May meeting, the board did give us some guidance. The first guidance was regarding the revenue requirement. The scenario we presented was reasonable, and the board wanted us to proceed with that scenario. The board also gave us guidance to look at cost of service from a gradual phase-in perspective, as we did during the last study. So we did find that there are some differences, which we'll refresh ourselves on in a minute. And we will want to continue to address those differences. So a gradual approach is the preferred method. And then lastly, there's general consensus on the rate design. The board did want to see one more iteration of the residential rates, keeping in the third tier, which we'll be sharing with you today. And then lastly, modification to the time of use rates, which looked at focusing on the PUD specific peak intervals instead of aligning with Bonneville's time periods for heavy load and light load hour definitions. So we've actually made progress on all these elements. We're still fine tuning the time of use consideration alternative, kind of looking at 3 peaks versus 2 peaks and ironing that out. But because of the timing of the overall need for the utility, we really wanted to get in front of you for the general rate schedule for all the classes of service. So before we dive in, just a reminder, a comprehensive study consists of 3 key analytical steps that have to be performed sequentially. We start the process by identifying the overall need for each utility independently, making sure that we can meet our needs not just today, but also on a multi-year forecast horizon. At this point, we're not really focusing which class is responsible for what, just identifying what it actually costs us to provide that service. Then we dive a little bit deeper. Once we have identified step number 1's dollar target, we split it up between classes and go into cost allocation, trying to answer the question if cost differences exist to provide service to different customers. So if you think of step 1 as identifying the size of the pie of cost, step 2 really focuses on slicing it into class-specific pieces. Lastly, once we know our class-specific targets and the total pool target of revenues that we need to collect, we need to work to develop the actual fixed and variable charges that are assessed to our customers. So now we'll take a look at just a high-level refresher of what we presented during the May meeting. We'll start with the revenue requirement. Now, in this slide, we're showing you the summary of the key elements of the proposed rate strategy. Here, the rate strategy looks at a 9% rate adjustment for 2025 to be ideally implemented in July, and we'll talk about timing towards the end, but that is currently the goal is to have the rates go into effect in July of this year, followed by 6.75% adjustments preliminarily right now in 26 through 2028 on an annual basis. This will allow us to fund almost a $70 million capital improvement program, but we will anticipate that we will need to utilize some borrowing, additional debt to build this program out. So out of the $68 million of capital that we have identified, 39 of it is currently anticipated to be debt financed. Now, as you get closer to the year of construction, this will be updated by your staff and revised, but this is a preliminary estimate based on the projections that we have in place right now. We are forecasting your ending balances right now based on policy requirements for both operations and capital. Kind of as a refresher, operating balances, we're targeting approximately 90 days of operating and maintenance expenses, which does include power expenditures, and a rolling average of 50% of 5-year average capital program. So here we're targeting total about $15 to $17 million per year to have on hand. Right now, we're projecting to be a little below that for a couple of years, but by the end of the 4-year cycle, with the proposed plan, we should be able to meet the minimum targets. Now, the figures that you're seeing here do not include the line of credit. The PED does have access to a $5 million line of credit just in case of emergencies to help float the operations. But right now, ideally, we will be meeting that minimum target with current balances. So that's step number one. Step number two, looked at cost of service. Again, focusing on interclass cost allocation. Here, we really want to look at how does each class, which is represented through a solid bar, compare to the solid black line in the middle. Now, you'll notice dashed lines around the solid black line, which kind of represents a range of reasonableness. I always say that every year your bullseye for cost of service changes because your budgets change, your usage patterns change, your average year modifies a little bit. So we want to be as close to that bar as possible. We don't necessarily have to hit it. So in the industry, we usually utilize a range of reasonableness anywhere from 5 to 10%, depending on the study and the availability of information. And we usually like to say that if we're within that range, within those dashed lines, close to that solid black line, we're within cost of service, and no additional adjustments are necessary outside of the average system-wide adjustment. Now, interpreting the results, what we're seeing is that the residential class of service and the general service class is within that range of reasonableness, kind of the first and the third bar, while the demand-based, small, large, and primary general in the middle 3 bars are a little bit outside of or a bit outside of the range of reasonableness, paying more than their allocated share of costs, and would need to increase less than or go down to get to cost of service. We're also finding that the irrigation and the primary interruptible schools are outside on the opposite end. They're not quite paying their allocated share costs, and we need to go up slightly more than average to help get them back in line with cost of service. So we talked about multiple ways how we can address it, and in the end, a phase-in strategy was recommended. So on this slide, we were providing you with a summary of the phase-in strategy for the cost of service. The first year, because the increase is slightly higher, we're trying to keep it as close to average for most classes as possible. So you'll notice the solid, kind of the bold number at the bottom of the chart represents the system-wide average you saw on the revenue requirement slide. The individual non-bolded percentages are either slightly higher than that number or slightly lower than that number. The weighted average of everybody adds up to 9 or 6.75, but classes that indicate they need to go up more than average in this 100% COSA slide or column will be increased slightly more than average. The percentages or classes that need to either go down or increase less than average will be increased less than average. So as an example, the middle classes that represent demand-based customers are going up at 3.5% versus 6.75%, because in reality they need to go down. And the reason why this is still an effective strategy is because their increase is less than average. So in effect, if there was no increase, they would actually be receiving an annual decrease every year. So because we do have a rate increase and they're increasing it less than the average increase, they're in effect receiving a reduction in their proportional share of costs. And as always, we recommend revisiting the findings every time you perform a comprehensive study such as this one to make sure that the results are still consistent. Lastly, we moved on to the rate design portion. As we discussed in rate design, the key primary goal of rate design is to collect the dollars identified in the first two steps. And after that, really align the goals and objectives of the utility with the cost basis that the analysis has identified. And there's not really a one-size-fits-all perfect solution that'll get us to one perfect rate strategy. This is where really we have to talk about policy and the goals of the utility, which the utility has been doing over the years as well. As a reminder, the primary goals that we were looking at is we compared or continue to compare our current rates, which are summarized at the bottom table, to our cost-based, I apologize, the current rates are summarized at the upper table, and to our cost-based unit costs, which are summarized down below. So you'll notice our residential rates, as an example, are currently $28.50 per month, with a 3-tiered rate that scales from 9.6 cents up to 13.3 cents, and there's no demand charge. Versus if we look at a cost-based rate, our fixed charges actually need to be almost $47 per month. Our energy charge would be fairly low at almost 4 cents per kilowatt hour, but we would also have a demand charge of up to $10.29 per kW. So again, from a cost basis perspective, there are demand costs due to the historical availability of metering in terms of being able to read demand meters, as well as the complexity of communicating, educating, and understanding what demand charges are and how do you impact them. Historically, many utilities across the region and the country have built in demand costs most likely into the energy charge component. That's why your energy rates are a bit higher than the actual cost-based rate, is because you're also recovering demand costs through those energy charges.
Hey, Sergey, I have a question,
Uh-huh.
and it relates to the demand charge. Is there a simple way to explain, like a hypothetical of what a monthly demand charge would be? Is it like the highest demand per month, or is it some sort of rolling average? How is the demand charge calculated, if you can explain it simply?
Yeah, typically utility will take a look at your instantaneous reads. You have to have advanced metering infrastructure available to read hourly demands,
Right.
and you would note your either highest 15-minute increment. This is currently how you bill your larger customers, or your highest hour. So whatever your highest usage pattern within the last 30 days, typically your billing cycle, that would be your demand. So if on day one you peaked and then you left the house, we still had to meet that peak in that billing period. So your demand would be based on that read during that first day or first hour. So again, it doesn't matter when it occurs during a specific point in time. It matters how high it occurs during that specific point in time.
Let's just say you got a business and they used 10 kilowatts was their peak. So then
Mhm.
let's say their demand charge is around $10 per kilowatt. Then they would have an additional $100 fee that
That
month,
is correct.
that scenario. Okay, thank you.
That is correct. Yeah. And the typical residential peak is usually around 8 kW or so, depending on the system and the customer, what type of heating they have. So if we follow the typical, that would be an $80 demand related charge if it was charged on the demand basis using these cost-based unit costs.
Right. And not everybody's paying a demand charge. Okay, thank you.
Right, exactly. Residential customers and small businesses do not currently pay a standalone demand charge.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So that was kind of the basis. First priority is to try to address it, not necessarily go 100% to cost of service unit cost, but gradually make incremental changes, moving us proportionally closer to that basis. The second goal was to look at eliminating the third tier. We found that since the implementation of the third tier, during extreme cold events or some colder months during the wintertime, there were quite a few folks that are being impacted by that third tier, especially a lot of those folks were in the low income category, which that hit them extra hard as well. So we wanted to see if we can alleviate some of that pressure coming from that third tier for those customers and move back towards more of a two-tier structure. And then as we talked about last time of use, which we'll be addressing in a future meeting. So in the next couple of slides, I'm just bringing back the information we shared, except with an addition of one slide. So the first slide will be looking at the residential tiers. What we're seeing here is the table at the top, which shows us the current tiers under the existing tier column. They're currently up to 0 to 600 kilowatt hours for the first tier, 601 to 1600 for a second, and anything above that for the third. The proposal would be to move back to 0 to 600 and anything over 600. You'll also see a fixed charges or basic charges for single and three-phase type of meters that start at $28.50 for the existing rate and go up to by about $5 in the first year and then $3 thereafter. The energy charges get consolidated. So instead of having a 13.3 cent kilowatt hour charge, now they get rolled up into two tiers, and the lower tier goes up slightly more. The upper tier goes up slightly more to account for the fact that we're eliminating the third tier. So after that, the upper threshold goes down from 13 to about 12.8, and that does include a rate increase in it. So even accounting for a rate increase, the upper tier is still lower than the current third tier. After that, oh, go ahead.
Sergey, on the chart for residential, by 2028, the service charge for single phase will be $42.50. Now, on the previous slide, according to your cost of service analysis, for residential, it looks like the actual allocated cost for residential customers would actually be $46.56. Is that accurate? Am I understanding this correctly?
That's correct. So in 2025, the charge will be $46. And we are projecting to get to the almost get to the 25 levels by 2028. Now, the logic behind it kind of stems from our prior discussions, even to the prior studies, that we really want to be gradual with our impact. So we are increasing and getting closer to our basic charge, but we don't want to do it all at one jump. Trying to keep kind of having a moderated impact to our low use customers as well as taking into account the upper customers that may be low income and are living in housing that is not as efficient and using higher electricity. So it's kind of a balancing act. We could have looked at an option that jumped us to $46 and then increased proportionally thereafter. I believe it gets up to close to $60 or so in the future years. But again, we had to balance the impact to the lowest customers. We had to balance the impacts to the upper range customers. And this was a little bit of a compromise of a phase-in that we developed, trying to get us closer and closer each time we look at this.
But Sergey, it's important to note that's a cumulative number. So in 2025, you got for that 200 kilowatt hour user, it's going up $683 a month. In 2026, it's going up an additional $446 a month. So you kind of have to add them all together.
That's correct. These additions are per month increases, so you would have to add them over the 4 years to come up with a combined impact over 4 years per month.
Please continue.
Okay, so this was the original slide we showed you. On the next slide, we're going to demonstrate what the requested alternative was. And all that the requested alternative does is keep the 3-tier structure at the top. The fixed charges or the basic charges get adjusted at the same pace or the same rate as on the prior scenario. The only change here is that we're maintaining the 3rd tier. So the 1334 goes up to 1428, and the lower rates are a little bit lower. So I'm going to go back one time. You can see that the charges here are 1057 and 1283. Now they're 1034 and 1255. Fractionally smaller because now we have a 3rd tier that allows us to collect proportionately more revenue through that tier, reducing the pressure on the lower tiers. But again, the intent of the change is to alleviate some pressure on those really upper users during those peak times when we are experiencing those cold weather, winter kind of a peaking month or cold snaps during the winter time. So I'll pause here for a second because this was requested. Let me
Yep.
know if you want me to flick back or and forth. Oh,
Yeah,
Kevin?
I've got it on my screen so I can go back and forth. I requested this information, and I guess what I took from it was when I compared like the highest and lowest users, keeping the third tier really only changes the monthly cost by $1 or $2. It's a pretty small difference. And I guess a question, when you did these two analyses, you're projecting that the revenue to the PUD would be identical under either one?
That's correct. Yeah, and 2000 is a little bit, is a higher end. There are customers that use more than 2000, but there's just a unlimited amount of usage levels that we could have shown you. So there are folks that are using a little bit more than 2000 as well. I
Okay.
think.
Yeah.
But yeah, all the approaches are generate the same amount of revenue for each class of service.
Right. So, yeah. And my understanding is the basic recommendation to go from a 3-tier to a 2-tier was to make it simpler, and I guess we were concerned about some of the higher energy users who are also low income customers and the impact on them. Am I summarizing this correctly? What the
That's
idea
correct.
behind eliminating the 3-tier? Okay. Questions on this one, or should we keep going?
Do you want any consensus now on which option to go?
Let's hold the discussion and deliberation until the end.
Oh, Kevin took his thing.
Did you have a hand up?
He did.
Yeah, the third tier removal was generated from staff. It really hit our low income people hard during the winter cold snap, and um, the reason we put it in was to be a conservation tool, and it just didn't work that way from staff's point of view. It ended up kind of hurting the lower income during the cold snap. So
Yeah.
that was the reasoning behind asking to have it removed.
And I remember when we adopted it, that was kind of the intent. And you can see how if it's just $1 or $2 a month for most people, it probably isn't going to have a significant energy conservation effect. But they probably literally were looking at a particular low income customer's bill. That low income customer may be in a house that's insulated more poorly. And then when it gets really cold, they've got to plug in more electric heaters, use more, and they spike it, and they're calling in saying, hey, why is my bill so high? And they're looking at it and they're seeing the results. So I appreciate that staff is actually using kind of a case analysis and saying, here's some impacts to people, and I don't think this policy is having the results that you intended. So that's the way I'm viewing it.
So one more in the weeds question for Kevin, because he's maybe the only one that can answer this. Taking into account that maybe we won't get quite the same level of conservation if we were to do away with the third tier, what in peaking events, particularly winter peaking events, does that put us into the grid is there a chance that the grid could become more susceptible? How fine of a line are we running there?
Without the major upgrades that we have planned in the 4-year work plan, we can't sustain the additional power usage. But during these cold snaps, people can't conserve. They have to have their heaters on. So for that reason, Dan, during the cold, it's a moot point.
Well, and it jumps ahead a little bit because one of the, the to-do tasks that's still on the list was Sergey was going to look at time of use rates, but from a perspective of helping us with those times when loads were heaviest. So I think more opportunity to talk.
Yeah, and I think messaging too. I think we can help with the newsletter and other places, the website, to make the public aware that this is, by doing away with this third tier, it could push us into more critical times during those peaking events, and we need the public to help us by conserving. I mean,
Yeah.
rather than using a punitive measure of having that third tier, there could be a consequence.
Yeah, and I think I like your point that when we know a cold weather event is coming, just reminding people that just, there are people who don't have a choice. Their house is going to be really cold. They got to turn the heat up. But there's other people who maybe the usage is discretionary. Hey, during this time, could you if you could skip a laundry day and not run your dryer, it could help us, or whatever the case might be. All right, let's keep going.
Okay. So the rest of the slides are fairly consistent. Again, this is exactly what was presented during the prior meeting for the rest of the class of service. Here, we're making adjustments to make grounds on the general service side for the basic charges, proportionally how we did on the residential side, and the energy charges, which are uniform rate, they're the same without a tier, are increasing to make up the class-specific increase. You can see with the average usage, $20 increase or so would be a typical increase that a customer sees, but the range of impacts is a little bit wider because unlike residential homes, there's a lot more spread of usages for different types of businesses. And as we get into bigger classes like small demand customers, we're introducing the demand component. There's a few customers that use quite a bit of energy before they reach that threshold of the class definition, or they reach it on a one-off basis because you have to get into the next class category, you have to exceed a certain peak threshold for a specific amount of time. So in this case, an average increase is approximately $200 to $100 depending on the year. But again, they're much larger customers, especially compared to residential homes. Here we're assuming 69 kWs average with a 40% or so load factor. And then going down class by class, as we get into large demand customers, average is quite a bit larger, 130,000 kilowatt hours per month. Here, we'll see an increase of about $1,400, scaling down to about $600, but again, much larger user on average. Primary customers, irrigation, very small subset of of the classes, one or two accounts in this category in general. Primary interruptible schools, as again a refresher, we held them constant during the last rate study, so they did not receive any rate adjustments, so they fell a little behind. So because they did not have the adjustments during the prior rate study period, they fell out of that rate and reasonableness just so. So we're having to do a little bit of a catch up for them this time around. And then lastly, a summary of all the fixed charges. Sometimes it's a little useful to see side by side what they currently are by class of service, as well as the annual gradual progressions of what the proposal is. Again, I apologize, it is a lot of numbers. Sometimes it gets a little bit too much, but we just wanted to show you the side by side for everybody. Similarly, on the next slide, we're going to show the energy charges transitioning for residential, as you saw from 3 tiers to 2 tiers. And lastly, demand charges. Only 4 classes out of everybody has a demand charge. Usually those will be the bigger customers on an account perspective basis. And then we finish things off with a brief survey that shows your current residential rates for an average customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours per month currently. Again, we always caution this is a little bit of an apples and oranges comparison because every utility is different, source of power is different, demographics are different, service territories, but folks always like to know how they compare. We know for a fact that a lot of these utilities are going through similar rate studies currently, and they're making similar type of decisions and making similar discussions as you are having. But the question does get asked, so this is kind of a comparison of your neighboring utilities that are around you.
And I had a comment on that slide, Sergey, and a question. So the 133, 34, where we're in the middle of kind of these other utilities in our area similar to us, it's not going to be 133, 34. The average goes up to 145, in July. And that puts us above everybody on this list. Do you have any information on other utilities? And I can't remember if I asked this last time, if they're all looking at similar rate increases because they're all suffering in some ways from additional higher costs of materials and so forth. What do you know about the other utilities and what they're looking at for rate changes?
So from a preliminary survey, because these things do change, we have a note here for, UTC did approve a PSC increase of about 11.5% increase, and a 6.4 for the following year. I'm not sure if they're going to revisit it before that one is going to be implemented. And I don't believe these were embedded. We're just using the listed rates. So I would have to go backwards and double check. PSC's rate schedules are a little tricky to interpret because they have a lot of tariffs and side surcharges and credits and so forth. So I would have to do a little bit of digging there. I believe Mason 3 is having an increase. I don't quite remember top of my head the level. And Clown PD is currently in the process of looking at the rates, so that their preliminary results are still pending, I believe.
All right. I appreciate you just providing some more information on that. Please continue.
Okay. So that really brings us to the end of presentation. Really, we're looking for feedback one last time for all the 3 elements of the study process. If there's no additional comments or modifications, the next step goal is to have a public hearing, just strictly focusing on these same electric rates we presented on June 17th, with the goal of having the new rate schedules go into effect July 5th of 2025. We're still working on the electric side on the time of use rates and the opt-out rates. That'll kind of conclude the electric side of things, and we then will refocus our energy, so to speak, to water, sewer, and the broadband revenue requirement cost of service components.
Okay. Well, Sergey, I just wanted to say that I've seen your presentations for a few years now, and I really appreciated the numbers in this one when I took the time to go through everything. It really, to me, tells the story in various different angles of the power of rates and what they do. So I appreciate how you presented the information. You're treating us as intelligent people that need to be informed about the rates, not just saying, here's what you should do. You're giving us the math behind it. I appreciate that. And then just for the public, before you comment, and usually people show up because they're not happy with costs going up. We have a pretty big challenge. And if you've been paying attention to the news that we're putting out, our ability to maintain reliable power pretty much almost crashed this winter. So when Kevin kind of quickly said, hey, yeah, we're looking like $68 million of investment over the next few years, that's a big number for us. So we've looked at various different ways to try and not just spread those costs among users, but to spread those costs over time by borrowing some money so we're not having to pay for that all now with cash. We put in a capacity charge for new homeowners that are coming and building are paying kind of like what the city charges with system development charges. So we're having them kind of pay us to kind of catch up for the fact that they haven't been here paying rates. So we realize it's a big number. We realize it's a big, pretty sizable rate increase. So just giving that as some context. So any further, we want to hold discussion until so any more questions, or
Well, maybe before the public chimes in too, and that's timeline. I know I heard the term, we're going to have a rate hearing. How much notice time, how many meetings, that sort of thing. What's the process? How does this all work out and play out for time? And we're taking some comments today. Are we going to take online comments in the interim as well? What's the process?
Well, and when we call it a hearing, it's legally not, I suppose Joel may give us the script to do the hearing script, so I guess it will be a little bit different. But all our meetings are public. Not every commission allows for public comment during their meetings. We do. The hearing provides a more formal script, but I think they're just anticipating one, because this is like the 3rd or 4th time we've talked about this. So I think we're anticipating one hearing and then potential action.
Yeah, just to be clear, someone can clarify so the public knows before they ask the questions what the process is.
So
when we have the hearing, that will be the final hearing, right?
Well,
is that the way we're going to look at it?
It isn't the final hearing, but they'll have a resolution prepared for us so that we're prepared to take action that night.
And when will the hearing part of our meeting be scheduled?
5 o'clock. So
Thank
we'll,
you.
and we've done that before. We get through however much of our agenda we can before, but when we hit 5, we start the hearing.
Because I'm looking at the July 5th effective rate, so we're going to make a decision so that that rate goes into effect on the 5th of July. We're at the 3rd of June.
Right.
We're talking about the 17th. I
And
don't
of
know if
course,
that number's
yeah,
going to change.
and if something happened, it doesn't have to go into effect July 5th, but that's what we're set up to do. Okay, public questions or comments on the presentation or the, rates or anything else kind of related that you'd like to talk about? Oh, well, while everybody's figuring out what they're going to say, Tom Tier's got his hand up first, so we'll let Tom go first. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks for the shout out, Kevin. Good to see you. So, of course, I'm chiming in because it's rate time. First, on the question of the public hearing that's coming up, it would be good if you would publicize when the cutoff date is for submission of written testimony, in addition to oral testimony, which will happen at the hearing, of course. Of course, everybody is shocked at the amount of increase that's going to be needed. I don't think I'm alone in that. I just, did some real quick calculations, and but between now and 28, we're looking at like 34% increase in residential rates, which is a lot to swallow. But it is what it is. I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't have the time of use stuff figured out yet, because I now have 2 EVs, and right now I don't have any incentive for deciding what time of day to charge them. So if you want to reduce my average peak usage there, this would be a good opportunity to do that. The two-tier versus 3-tier thing, I can see how the 3rd tier can be a disadvantage for some low-income people with inefficient systems. If you go to a 2-tier system, though, I would recommend changing the cutoff point from 600 to 800, because everybody is using many more electrical utility appliances, cars, and so on and so forth. So the number of people that will fall into that 1st tier are going to be reduced, and that's just inevitable as we electrify the world. So again, move it from 600 to 800, see how that works out. 2 years from now, you might find that, well, that wasn't quite enough or whatever, but that would be my suggestion on that. This gradualism approach, the frog in the pot of water approach, it is what it is. But as long as you're being upfront with the public, as you are in these rate presentations, there's nothing we can do about it, because we got to keep the lights on. The base rate, I guess, is the one that troubles me more, because since the PUD took over, what you're doing is a 440% increase in the base rate. And I did the numbers on the CPI over that same period of time, and it's been 46%. So basically increasing the base rate at 10 times the rate of inflation. That seems like a lot, but I guess it just shows that the amount of infrastructure repairs that are needed to get this system back up to where it really should be and keep it running for the safety of everybody. So, I appreciate the clarity of the presentation, the quality of the discussion, and not looking forward to paying the higher rates, but it is what it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And we'll hold our kind of picking up on the thoughts you've raised until we give everybody a chance to talk. Okay. So next one, Cindy, and then I'll go to the one on the screen.
Sure. So Cindy Jane again, speaking as an individual, but I will talk a little bit about some of the Climate Action Committee modeling that's happened. So I won't comment on the rate increase in general. Obviously, yeah, nobody likes rate increases, but I appreciate you being forward thinking and looking at what you need to do to build a reliable system and understand that. I want to comment on the removing the tier 3. I was never a fan of tier 3 initially, so happy to hear it being considered for removal. And my reason is more the Climate Action Committee modeling shows to reduce our greenhouse gases across the community, we need to fuel switch from propane and gas, both in our vehicles and our cooking and heating of our houses. And by not having that tier 3, that's sort of a disincentive to do that fuel switching. It makes that the cost benefit of that is worse if the higher rate. And I know I hit tier 3 in wintertime now because I plug in the EV and it'll definitely hit that tier 3 rate. So I think for the good of the community carbon footprint, getting rid of tier 3 is a good idea. And I appreciate Tom Tiersch's comments and agree also of time of use. I try to charge my EV in the middle of the night right now just because I know it's the right thing to do. But I think having that and getting more messaging out about that and about the need to do that would be great. And I have a water heater as well now that would be able to take advantage of that. So I encourage you to look at that and implement that in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. I'm going to go to the one on the screen. I can't.
It's Bill
Bill
Lusk.
Phil Lusk. Okay, Bill, you are up. Are you there, Phil?
This is Phil Stower. Did I raise my hand? Though I do
Oh,
a
you're
star nine.
Which is there two? There are two Phils. I'm sorry. I'll lower my. I'll mute here.
Hold fire, and Phil Lusk, you're on.
Yes, sir. Thank you. In my 3 minutes, I want to thank, as you did, Commissioner Randall, FCS Group and Sergey for an excellent presentation. And once again, always appreciate getting a good schooling on how to do the cost of service allocations. Strangely, I find myself strongly supporting, the rate increase. And in fact, I think that now you're being very proactive. My only counsel would be to try to mirror to the greatest extent possible increases to the basic charge, because that's what reflects, your cost of service with Bonneville Power Administration. But once again, I think that what SES Group has done is a good compromise, which is the sacred art of policymaking. I just want to comment a little bit on the behalf of low-income people and other random topics, but earlier discussions focused on CETA and the impact that the PUD's assistance program was having, not only on the electric utility in general, but also the considerations for that. And then to also bring up what I've been mentioning for the past 3 months is the importance of program is I'm hoping your revitalized residential conservation program will be able to affect is getting more ductless heat pumps into the homes and residences of low income and moderate income people. The comment that, you had this third tier because it would act as an incentive for people, low income people or other people to switch their consumption to lower their consumption. Well, quite honestly, most low income people can barely afford groceries. And it's going to be programs like the Climate Commitment Act funding of the HERE program that you're currently administering that is going to make the difference in the long run. And I just want to reiterate one last thing, is that for the third year in a row, the Columbia River Basin and its associated tributaries is experiencing, let's say a drought event that's somewhere between 100 and 1,000 years. And I like to go play blackjack upon occasion, and I'm not going to take that bet. And this is why I would suggest that, metaphorically, that the PUD really double down on the efficiency efforts and especially targeting those in the low and moderate income people that are going to be impacted most by these higher rates. And I thank you for today's comment time.
Thank you for your comment, Phil Lusk. I'm going to go to the room before we go back to the board. Front row.
I'm not a regular, so I'll say my name. I'm Jason Victor Serenas, and I live in Port Townsend. Everything I've heard is extremely reasonable. Everyone is doing their darndest to educate all of us. I just want to say, since I've never looked at Kevin directly in the face, although I'm looking at you via screen, years ago when we first came here, I called Kevin and I just want to acknowledge how wonderful he was, how much he heard my problems with electricity and everything, and how he really answered that. And it really made me feel how special a place like Port Townsend is as opposed to a place like Oakland, California. Having said that, here's the issue. What I hear is lots of reasonable voices from very calm people who are being very, very rational. And bravo for all of us. The reality is This is a huge increase and it's really going to hurt. And for people who are just getting the word, because it just came out in the Leader and then it came out in the Beacon, so people have seen it. Now, I don't know how that reflects either in anybody in this room. It certainly got me, and how that reflects anyone on with anyone online. But to see how fast this is going to come, and without wishing to criticize or mocking anyone, the phrase "it is what it is" just is a little too uncomfortable to the Republican person who just in the legislature said something like, well, everyone's going to die for her answer to something. And I'm not accusing anyone involved in this of being on that level at all. Yet the impact for this is really going to hurt some people. Understand very well that in the long run, they're being hurt for their better good. Nonetheless, if it hurts people to the point that it impacts what they're eating, when they see the doctor, when they take medication, they may not be around for that better good. So I just want to express my appreciation and my equal frustration. I don't think there's an easy answer, but this is a huge increase. And, you know, I thought, oh, it's 9%. Oh, no, it's 9%, then it's 6.75%, then it's 6.75. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's just huge. And I mean, a part of me goes, rationality aside, it just goes no. So that's what I want to say. And I think that's what a lot of people are feeling and are going to feel, which is no. And I don't know what to do about that, but everything is coming down on people at once. And we know that all the federal money is like drying up. We know everything that's happening. And I just want to say personally, so I can say it out in public, as a gay man, I just found on the news today that the ship named for Harvey Milk, who was murdered in San Francisco, that name is being taken away. So we are dealing with such a level of vindictiveness that I can't believe. And so people are hurting a lot, and I just want to say that hurt manifests on all different levels, and this unfortunately adds to it. I have no glorious conclusion. I'm a writer. I'd like to have a lovely little thing at the end of my article. I have no lovely little thing at the end of my article. Perhaps that's the best conclusion that I can give to my 3 minutes.
Thank you. All right, so I think there was a hand on Phil Stover. Did you have your hand up? Or were you just responding to hearing your name, Phil?
Gentleman in the audience has his hand up.
Okay, we'll go to the gentleman in the
Hi,
audience. Now, hang on, Phil, you're just, hang on. You can go next.
Okay, am I on?
You're on.
My name is John Capps. I've been here before. I've had an issue that may affect a subset of up to 8% of the residential service areas, the customers. And my statement, first of all, I think everything presented is just perfect. We're about to go through a process which must not be delayed. Increases have to occur. It needs to be done fairly. And I think we're on the road to doing that. And it's always tough to follow you, Jason. But I do have a request over the next few months. I sent to all three commissioners, and thank you. You've started this process for me. I want to separate from this process, which must go ahead in a timely fashion, what I believe is a needed change by the end of the year to make minor adjustments and make a correction to a pretty gross inequity for a small number of people. And that is the issue of unnecessary multiple meters that If we could afford to remove them, we'd remove them. We can't afford to do that. And they're no longer required, they're no longer necessary. But I'm being charged, and perhaps others are being charged up to 3 times the base rate that my neighbor and neighbors are paying for the same level of service. So I have put together a plan, 1-page plan, and the financial impact of it. I've submitted it to all 3 commissioners, and I appreciate your time on this. It has made its way to Kevin, and Kevin is sending it to FCS to see if it has any merit. I want to separate this because I think it's important to be considered carefully. But it's a minor adjustment. The plan is compatible with the new approved schedule of rate increases, or should it be approved, it would require an annual end-of-year reconciliation and minor adjustment of the base rate only to reflect equal shares for equal service levels. Discounts would be provided, limited to qualified applicants as determined by the Board of Commissioners. There was the historical offered solution, which is, well, that's easy. You go pay an electrician to remove the unnecessary meters, the ones that aren't required. And the problem is it's a hollow offer. If I'm struggling on a fixed income, as others may be, to pay a base rate before I turn on a light switch, $85.50 a month this year, going up to $120 over the next 4 years. If I'm struggling with that, I don't have the money on a fixed income to spend $5,000 to $10,000 to take out meters. If I was able to do that, you would be faced with the same loss of revenue from those meters. And you would have to go back and adjust the rates, just as my plan suggests. So it's of no benefit to the PUD or its customers to have me spend $5,000 to $10,000 with an electrician. It really doesn't help. So I'm asking for careful consideration of this. I think it could cost pennies. I don't think there are that many people in my situation. We don't know the exact numbers. And by the way, I call it, the title of the plan that I sent out is a revenue neutral plan to correct base rate inequity, residential base rate inequity. And I do believe.
And John, can you wrap up? Because you're well past your 3 minutes.
Revenue neutral, there would be minor administrative costs, of course, but I know the PUD is all about fair and equitable distribution, and what better reason for a minor administrative cost than making things fair and equitable? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, John. Anybody else in the room? Yes, Nicole.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Nicole Gauthier. I'm the general manager for Jefferson Transit Authority, and I am here just to inform the commissioners about some of the plans that Jefferson Transit is undertaking. Currently, we have 2 battery electric buses. We are slated to receive our 3rd by the end of the year. We've just installed inductive charging at 4 Corners, which is very exciting. It's been a years-long process. So very excited about that. We are also looking at redesigning our Haynes Place location, including adding some in-route charging for our buses so that we can use our beautiful new buses all year long or all day long. The Jefferson Transit Authority Board is committed to going electric. This is something that they've talked about for many years. It's a direction that they've asked me to go in, which is great. These rate increases are a little bit concerning, not only because they're happening mid-year, which will greatly affect Jefferson Transit's budget, but also our ability to continue to buy electric vehicles moving forward. I have lots of questions. I've tried to do the math. I was a liberal arts major, so I'll probably need someone else to check my math for me. But just, I just want to keep that conversation going about Jefferson Transit's commitment to being a zero emission fleet and what that will do to the PUD. I think also having some conversations about how Jefferson Transit is charging our vehicles, when we're charging our vehicles, how quickly we're charging our vehicles, what it will mean to the PUD. Love to just make sure that that partnership and those conversations continue to happen. Because again, if we continue to move in the direction of being fully electric, it will impact the PUD, but also Jefferson Transit's ability to operate. So thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Nicole. I'll just put a little thought as you continue to engage with us as we go through this. If you're able to do any comparisons on miles driven with your diesels and cost at current prices and miles driven with your electric and costs at current prices, that would be interesting for me to hear as a commissioner. And then how you charge and the infrastructure you're putting in and when that totally comes back to this time of use rate thing. So anyway, just some thoughts for as you continue to engage with us, or really appreciate you being here. Okay. Roger, I think, has his hand. Actually, I told Phil Stover, I said you could go next. Are you ready to go? I think you're muted if you're trying to talk.
Hi, this is Phil. I just want to make two hopefully quick comments. One is that the way that we ended up where we are today is, I think, a lack of forward planning and capital reserve planning. I think a financial analysis would show that if this had been projected and 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, that we wouldn't have the bubble in that we have today that we have to finance for 30 years. So my concern is that we can't do anything about that. But the next bubble, I think we need to level off some way. And I don't know how you're going to do that, but there's going to be another substation that's going to be required. Obviously, we just heard that there's going to be more demand for power for electric vehicles. So there needs to be some thought about how we get beyond this situation, even though this is a huge issue right now. I think the future still needs some attention. The other thing I wanted to point out is that time of use. I think that's a thorny subject because it tends to punish people who can't take advantage of it, depending on how it's structured. But I think there's a huge potential, and it's growing with people who have discretionary use patterns for charging things or using electric appliances. And I think there just ought to be a way to tap into that to help the PUD avoid cost in some manner. And I don't know how you reward people. I mean, I'm happy as a solar panel owner to contribute to the rainy day fund that my excess production. I think that's an awesome way for that to happen at the end in every April. And more things like that could be done with time of use. Thanks.
Thanks, Philip. And I think Roger Risley, are you on there, Roger? With your hand up?
Yep.
We can hear you.
Okay. Got it. Starting with the third tier. It's our least regressive charge of all of our charges. And in the bigger picture, I think in order to help people afford their electricity, we should go after our most regressive charge, and that's the monthly fee. To help people afford their electricity, I think we should start reducing the monthly charge. Monthly charge, $33.50, that's a 17.5% increase. There's no way you could get that kind of decoupling money in a regulated rate environment. By decoupling money, I mean decoupling your revenue from your sales. Most utility commissions take a dim view of that. it's our job is selling electricity, not charging fees. And in that respect, I think that our monthly charges are excessive, and I don't think that's the way we should be making our money. It's another example of a utility causing inflation and benefiting from it. And speaking of inflation, in the background report in front of Sergey's presentation, you said that inflation, you mentioned it as a reason for rate and fee increases. And in an organization that's $99 million in debt, you must be benefiting from inflation. Paying a 2013 debt with $2,025, that's a pretty good deal. Price, rate, and fee increases are what cause inflation. And utilities are one of the main drivers of inflation. We know that too. Pretend that we need to raise rates and fees because of inflation obfuscates the cause with the effect. More on cost of service and cost recovery. I think that we have a serious too big to pay problem. I see that we're going to be taking down the porch trees for them, and we're going to be grinding the stumps for them too, contrary to our tree policy. We seem to be intent on exempting public agencies from our capacity charges. I see the Port Ludlow improvements. We're going to pay for those, and that's over $900,000, I think. And according to the law, extensions attributable to the resort are supposed to be paid for by the resort. There's some money there that we're leaving on the table. I don't want to have to pay for that. I wonder what the real cost of service is for the Navy, too. Our cost of service study, we only have 20 large customers, but we don't keep track of their costs. We use an algorithm instead to measure cost of service, and that algorithm, it's kind of like weighted dice, I think. It seems to favor the big guys. We know that the largest customers use 28% of our power, but they only provide 14% of the revenue. Residents use 54% of the electricity and provide 65% of the revenue. There's a $4.5 million subsidy there. And I think that's a gap that we need to narrow. I did the same study 6 years ago, and that subsidy was $4 million, and now it's $4.5 million. I think we're going the wrong way on that. I think that we need to be charging our larger customers a lot more. I don't think that the cost allocations are necessarily applicable to us. Anyhow, I'll let it go at that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Roger. Okay. Anybody else in the room? Everybody here has talked. Anybody else online? I think we've done it all. Okay. So now it's time to discuss and deliberate. And I think what staff has presented us is their recommendations, the consultant's recommendations on the rate changes that we would consider at a public hearing. And the date on that, again, I wrote it down on that, June 17th. There's some additional questions about time of use and some other things that it sounds like we could, we'll continue to work on and could be added later if we decide to implement policies on those things. What do we want to do at this point? We don't have to make a decision, but I think more direction to staff. I think they're probably looking for, are we headed in the right direction? Do we have major concerns prior to the hearing? What are our thoughts?
I guess one of the questions is, and Roger alluded to the base rate, is how we're going to, are we comfortable with the base rate proposals that we're seeing? Is that someplace we want to tweak things or not? And so that was one. And then the other is the third tier. I'm not a proponent of maintaining the third tier. I like the 2-tier. Now, Tom threw out there the 800. I don't know what that does to Sergey and Kevin for trying to produce any kind of a model between now and the 17th to address that. So that's just a couple of quick things in the conversations that relate to what decisions do we want to make, or what direction do we want to give.
Is there interest in the board on having Sergey look at increasing the tier 1 to 800?
I think we need to understand the impact of
Right.
it before, we can give it any real consideration.
Yeah, do we have the time? That's the question I'm asking. I'm not opposed to anything that was suggested, but do we have the time?
Kevin?
What I'd like to propose is a little different scenario is with the 800, because I do think we should look at it, but we would look at it for the 2026 budget year. Because we do have to, it would take quite a bit of work, and I know we're trying to get this through quickly. One of the reasons we try to raise the electrical rates is during the summer so that it's at our least usage months for the customers and they kind of get used to them. So I don't know if the board needs the 6 to 800, which I don't mind looking at. I think that's a good suggestion. But we would look at it after this and it would be changed in the 2026 budget timeframe.
Okay, so it sounds like your concern is if we looked at that now, that could throw us off of our schedule for trying to, and as you said, we're trying to implement it now so that
less impact.
Residential users who see their bills go up significantly in the winter get used to it sooner. And I realize that some agencies may have a fairly flat energy consumption, so they don't see that. Okay, so on that one, we're interested in the 800 and we're okay with having it be a future thing and being affected into the rates maybe next year.
Yep.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Again, the third tier, I think, is there consensus that we don't?
I'm okay with it going away. And I guess from my perspective, I'm okay with it going away because I don't see the numbers being significant enough to change behavior. It's like $1 to $2 a month on what we saw. And that does not mean that you don't have a poorly insulated house where it's super cold and they got to plug in everything to stay warm, that their impact would be much, much higher. So I believe staff in that the third tier is causing those disproportional impacts. And I'm looking at it from a conservation perspective. I don't think it's having necessarily the conservation goal that we wanted. And when you look at the rates, when they go from 3 tiers to 2 tiers, the second tier basically is jumping up to what the third tier was. So we've got, pretty good.
Well, I think we're agreed that the third tier can go.
Yeah, I think there's no objection.
And then I appreciate Roger and Tom's in particular. I heard their comments on the base rate, but that's the premise we've been going on, is that I think we've somewhat had consensus that we were going to go with a higher base rate. Is this the right?
So
blend?
I'm not in consensus on that. I've voted for the rate proposals we've had, but I do not favor this. I concur with folks who say, hey, if you had a regulatory body that was looking at your conservation efforts, you wouldn't get away with the base rates that the PUDs charge. So I think it's anti-conservation. I think it's having these disproportional impacts on, people with multiple meters are now paying attention to the base rates. It's going to get high enough that people are going to notice, and that will be a built-in, baked-in part of their bill they can do nothing about. So the higher it goes, the worse the problem is going to get. I am not comfortable with the base rates that are proposed. I go too high.
So, and I am. So that leaves Ken in the back.
Ken in the middle.
So I understand the different points made about the base rate. I think one part of the analysis that seems to be missing, that goes back to Roger's perennial criticism of the rates being disproportionately placed on the residential customers, and that is, what does it cost to provide the maintenance services for the residential customers, of which we have thousands more than we do the large consumers of electricity, of which the numbers are very small. So this I think would be something that for a future analysis, having that information would be helpful in terms of being able to justify why the rates are the way they are. And I understand in terms of conservation that having much higher consumption charges might have an effect. But I'm not convinced that the people who are the largest consumers of electricity would really be willing to modify their behaviors. And I do see the impact on low-income people, which, while we have, I think, a reasonable policy to subsidize low-income people, which as utilities, as public utilities go, is actually quite generous. I mean, it's been for several years $500,000 a year. Plus, there have been other programs that we've taken advantage of that provide additional subsidization. I'm very disturbed that the LIHEAP program seems to be in jeopardy. That's going to cause a great deal of pain. We can't do anything about that, but it's part of the overall picture. And Jason, if you come up with a solution, I'll look in your column for that.
Yeah, there's federal and state impacts that are going to hit us that we have to be mindful that you and us are going to have to cover those costs moving forward that maybe were subsidized before.
And
I'm done.
okay. And if it's any consolation, the numbers that we saw on the first go around was worse. You know, they had it up in 11% in the first year and higher in the following years. And I think staff has worked hard to figure out, again, spreading costs over time. So it's not all paid for now. It can be paid for over 30, 40 years of borrowing money to make a lot of these expensive, $60, $70 million infrastructure improvements we need. So they've massaged the numbers, and I don't disagree with the comments that inflation fuels inflation. I mean, that's another example of circular economy, and we're kind of in that loop. I think about that when I go out to lunch with my mom to a non-fancy restaurant, and it's $40, for a lunch. It's not dinner. If you got dinner, that'd be 2 or 3 times that. So it's like things are more expensive now, and I look at the impacts, to businesses. I look at the impacts to the schools, even though they're saying, hey, we're below the charge. It's like thousands of dollars that the schools are going to pay. So it's going to be joint pain. And the only thing that's worse than that, or one of the things that's worse, is that outage that happened over the weekend or the end of last week. And we're really creaky. And the point, hey, you should have, go back in time 5 to 10 years and make some changes. We were doing the best we could then. I think we're doing the best we can now. And if we don't make these infrastructure improvements, we're going to have a lot bigger problems.
Did you read on the PUD website what caused the outage?
Oh, I'm not saying that was our fault.
Okay.
I'm not saying that was our fault. I'm
clear about that.
I'm saying it's an example of when an outage happens, it's really painful. I'm not saying that we.
All right.
Yeah.
Just to be clear,
that was
not our fault.
That wasn't
your fault.
That wasn't.
We're trying to avoid the fact that it would be our fault because the grid can't handle what's
to
happen.
We need the grid to stay up as much as possible, and right now it needs some major improvements. So anyway, I appreciate the comments, and to staff, we're probably going to need a bigger room, or we're going to need to rearrange this one to have more chairs, because we're going to probably have more people at the next one, and pull the desks up and have some more rows, because we're probably going to need them for that hearing. And again, I thank you guys for being here. I thank you guys for caring. We all own this thing together. We're your representatives. We don't own it. We own it collectively. And there's positive sides of the PUD, all the jobs and things we're doing, and that we can get to outages more quickly. And you have someone to complain to. If this was PSE, it's like, what would we have to do about it? Here, we have some control. So anyway,
So on the time of use, it's on the radar and it's ripe. We're getting to the point where now it makes sense. On the meters, Kevin and Sergey, you are aware of the proposal by the public on the 3-meter issue, correct? Just to follow up on that. Kevin's shaking his head. Yes, we can't hear him, but
you're muted, Kevin.
It won't be part of the discussion. It would be picked up later on. I will say staff struggles with the proposal where we actually would have to increase base rates. So, but that is for a discussion for another day. It'd be after we worked through these rates.
And a little bit more here, again, put things in context and a little bit of the history too is, this is the evolution of a utility that didn't exist 13 years ago. So we have to keep it in perspective. The budget is 10 times what it was 10 or 12 years ago, right? So, and we have 85 employees instead of 15. So it's not like we're just saying, give us more money. It's requiring for us to do the things we do with the grid, with our manpower. And we're banking a little bit, no puns intended, on getting funding at a reasonable rate. That's still a big if too. So I would just caution everybody, don't get too comfortable that this is some sort of it's painful, but it could get more painful if things don't work out the way that we planned for and hoped for here. So again, I hate to always be on the negative side of the equation, but I just don't want people's expectations to get so high that they think that this is some sort of silver bullet. Even though it's painful, it's a silver bullet. We have a lot of challenges in the next decade to keep things up to speed. And to Tom or someone made the comment about, or maybe it was Phil, about not being forward thinking, and Jeff kind of poo-pooed that a little bit. But we're trying to be forward thinking, but this is not something that you just can solve with a silver bullet or a wave of a wand. Again, a couple other things real quick. The State Association of PUDs, we work on things behind the scenes, us as individual commissioners and the association, to make the legislation work out to help the low-income people, to help fund the projects we need funding. But, you've seen the state budget this year. You've heard all the things that are going on. There's just a lot of pressures on us, and we're spending money on things that the state is unfunded mandates in a lot of ways to us that we have to cover because we're in their right of ways and things like that. So there's a lot of things that we don't talk about at these meetings that go into these budget discussions and the capital improvement plans that you're not in the weeds like we are behind the scenes. So I just want you to understand, we hear what you're saying. We understand it. We're sympathetic and empathetic to it, but there's other people working behind the scenes at different levels to try and mitigate this stuff. So I just want you to know that work is being done. Electrification in general, it's going to overtake any possibility of us conserving, right? We've heard what transit wants to do. We are right now, we're going to have a new 20-year contract at the end of this year for power from BPA. And we're right on the cusp now of being pushed into a higher tiered rate for what our energy is going to cost us. If we electrify and can't offset that with conservation, that is a financial impact to the utility. So, and it also puts the grid at risk for us not having equipment in place to deal with. So I just want people to understand there's a lot of moving parts to this, and we hear and see it all. And we hope that you understand that we're doing our best to mark all the boxes, dot the I's, cross the T's. So.
Yeah, and I would say that the plan kind of sucks,
And
but
COVID did.
It's the best plan we can come up with. And it still sucks. 9% sucks. I'll just put it on the record. The one thing as I think about this, having PSE as our electric utility had a lot of negatives. We didn't have anybody working here from them. If there were outages, we were the last ones to get attention, us and Blaine, basically, up on the border. We're the far distant ones. But the good thing was when they had to build a substation, people in Bellevue helped pay for it. So now when we have to build a substation, we have to pay for it. And that's one downside. But I think the positives of we have people working here. We can respond to things more quickly. We can do our own planning where we're not investing in it just enough to be able to sell the asset and make a big windfall. We're investing in this to own it 100 years. So, you know, it's a different outlook, and we inherited infrastructure that had been uninvested in for, you know, I don't know how long PSE was around, a long time, decades.
The PSC wasn't building new
Exactly.
substations.
Well, they did when they had to, but yeah, they pretty much tried to avoid it.
Yeah.
They upgraded.
So
Anyway. So I think the message to staff is I think your plan is on target with what the board is comfortable with, I think. And the items to be talked about later, we've heard some more feedback on it. There is interest in the time of use rates, especially if we can address the peak load issue, which is the issue that creates real problems for us, and to the extent that we can figure out how it might help us with the tier. I guess peak loading and tier 2 are kind of the same thing in a way with BPA.
We could be in tier 2 without peaking.
But I mean, the two might line up. So I think that's kind of what we're interested in, time of use rates, if they could help us with those things, which would save us money. Okay. I think we're done. We're going to have a hearing on June 17th. And like I said, be prepared for, you know, a lot more people in the room. And thanks again for everybody showing up, and your comments are thoughtful and appreciated. And it is now 5:51 and we are adjourned.
Thank you.